Hey y'all, Joseph here, and today is day number 16 of studying for the MCAT, and hopefully, I hope you are all doing well. But if you have some free time, come check out my site at It Began With Potatoes at shakanine.blog. Shakanine is a glycoalkaloid poison found in potatoes, inspired by nature's poisons. This was, a kind of project that I wanted to do on the side just to practice my writing. And yeah, it's really cool to do some writing now and again, and I'd love to see you, or I'd love to hear from you what you think about my blogs and my posts and everything. So, anyways, today's a little bit different. It's not going to be about MCAT related stuff, but I'll tell you a little bit about my day today. I went to go grade some 3A exams. 3A exams being here at Berkeley, our Introduction to Organic Chemistry course, where you're introduced to SN1, SN2, E1, E2, the like. Um, and yeah, so basically I was upgrading from like 7 till 4:30 p.m. Or sorry, we were grading in the afternoon and I was proctoring an exam up in the morning. So yeah, that's what I was doing. But yeah, come check out my website. And today I wanted to talk about affirmative action and gender gaps and the recent Google memo that might have been floating around. I've only read a little bit about it, but I have a couple of opinions that I want to share. Yeah, so the first one I'm going to hit on is the article that my friend posted, Joseph Lin, my friend from high school. He's a chem beast, but he's doing CS now. Essentially, there was a guy recently or there was a memo, an internal memo at Google that got out that it was essentially saying that the gender gap at Google wasn't something to be worried about, and he was trying to explain away the idea of the fact that a gender gap exists at Google. So essentially, he's saying that Google has an ideological echo chamber, and what that really means is just that the opinions that are formed within the company were bouncing back and forth. And what that individual thought that's now fired, what that individual thought was that essentially the fact that there were fewer women, fewer minorities, and that minorities were getting advantages to getting hired in the corporation were unfair and not necessarily needed. Um, were essentially, or he was essentially ripped apart by the public media. And yeah, so he posted his opinions on this site, diversitymemo.com. So you can go and check that out. He recently got fired from Google after this got out, and I believe that he is possibly choosing to sue against Google. Although apparently, from what I've read, his lawsuit may not have a lot of strength going in. So basically, the author sounds like he has a background in some sociology. He brings up terms like social constructionism, which are relevant to the MCAT, but mostly, for the most part, I just read this because I thought it was an interesting read. Yeah, so his argument is mainly based around the idea that women have different inherent biological as well as personality characteristics that make them less inclined to want to achieve for higher status. Whether or not you agree to what he says, it's worth hearing about because I do agree with his point that you need to have discussion in order to bring about more like egalitarian society. So, anyways, so his background was he was trying to prevent people from taking political, like what's the word for it, from being highly polarized on the issue, like being completely either liberal or conservative, and rather he was trying to mediate between the two and trying not to offend people. That's what I was getting. So his first premise was that Google, as a company, should have reason to talk about whether or not they want to pursue a more liberal, more conservative ideology, and how both are important to the structure of the company because at different times, different decisions require a little more liberal or a conservative approach, and completely smothering out one of the opinions was not going to be effective for long-term health of the company. So he goes on to he makes this like small chart and talks about it. That's just his personal opinion. I don't think this was the part that most people had a problem with. Okay, so then we get to this next part, the possible non-biased causes of the gender gap in technology. So I do have a friend, Lucy Shao. She is CS here at Berkeley, and I believe she's in like female woman in tech or something. I don't know what is it, but there has been recognized that there is a large gender disparity in computer sciences and in like hard sciences, just in general. And what the author is saying is somewhat reminiscent of what people were saying about the Jewish back when 1940, 1950s. Like it's reminiscent of how people were saying, oh, people have like inherent biological reasons not to be equal. Yeah, I don't know. I don't buy into. I guess I didn't phrase that well, but yeah, I don't buy this author's argument that he's saying that women essentially are more like he said men are more inclined to be neurotics, and then women are more inclined to be agreeable, meaning that they like to talk to people. Um, I mean, making these generalizations about people across an entire field, I think that while you can generalize and you can use stereotypes as cognitive models for assisting how you think, they shouldn't be generalized to individual people because individual people are different. So making these generalizations shouldn't. I mean, you can explain the gender gap, but that doesn't mean it's not. I don't know. It's not going to change. So yeah, that's what I'm just trying to get at. I don't know. I didn't phrase that too well. But yeah, he's saying that the gender gap exists and that that's perfectly okay because men are um, more inclined to want to strive for higher statuses and sacrifice their life because they're always trying to achieve a higher status. Whether or not you agree to that, I don't know. But it sounds a little bit like where is my book? Okay, my book Nature, Ralph Waldo Emerson. It has like these slight traces of sexism in it, like characterizing nature as like dominable and as a female. Yeah, so it just doesn't sit right with me. His argument, and he's saying yeah, the population has overlapped, and we shouldn't treat people or we shouldn't treat individuals as as what their group identity is. Yeah. Yeah, so if you read down to personality differences, he goes over what personality difference he thinks the women have in general versus men. Even though he says not to group people, I don't know what he was trying to do here. And then he goes over why men want to achieve more and how their own personal views of themselves are based on a higher status, and that's why they're more inclined to be at higher positions, and that's okay. And I don't think that women are any less inclined to achieve higher status. In fact, a lot of my friends that are girls are probably just as hardworking and probably more so than I am, to be honest. So here's some non-discriminatory ways to reduce the gender gap. So these ideas were more based around the idea that women are tend to be towards like the front end of programming more. They like to cooperate with people. So his idea was, oh, let's have women just work in more people-oriented programming, and then goes on to say, oh, never mind. Well, there are just some parts of computer science that are just inclined to, and then he implies that men are better suited for the position because they're less, I'm assuming, people oriented. Um, I mean, if you can make the conclusion about all women that they're more people oriented, and therefore that causes their behavior to like, or it causes their group as a whole to act like that, then maybe you can explain away the gender gap. But yeah, I mean, just as a contemporary student in college, it just doesn't sit well with me. Yeah. Yeah, so he goes out to talk about the harm of Google's biases. Yeah, he doesn't like the idea that certain programs are essentially oriented around either a minority group, around women, around basically disadvantaged groups. He says that they should be open to, or I guess it would be less diverse and more competitive if like Caucasian males and Asian males were also available to enter the group. Yeah. So he talks about biases a little bit and how being politically correct is going to hinder speech. And the argument for that is that, oh, because people are afraid to make these microaggressions, they view their own personal speech as possible violence. And I think that's actually an interesting case. I'm not quite sure. I haven't read up on this at all. So finally, these are his suggestions. Um, yeah, he just basically recaps everything, and and then he says here at the end, I value diversity and inclusion, am not denying that sexism exists, and don't endorse using stereotypes. While addressing the gap in representation of the population, we need to look at the population level differences in distributions. So he's saying we're taking like a macro sociological approach to it. And I mean, um, while it's probably likely that he's not getting his job back, I think that the public awareness that he brought about in this situation is quite interesting. Yeah, so that was it for this one, and I'll go over the New Yorker. There was an affirmative action post that they put out a couple days ago, or 14 hours ago, actually. Yeah, that I read. I thought it was interesting by Jeannie Suck Gerson. I hope I didn't say her name wrong. And essentially, what Jeannie Suckerson was trying to say was that most Asian Americans are actually for affirmative action, and that affirmative action is something that makes Asian Americans uncomfortable. And even if it were to be repealed and we were to see more Asian Americans on Ivy League campuses, she said it wouldn't necessarily be beneficial to students or to the college campuses that they get onto. She talks about Harvard because she's a law professor at Harvard, and she says that while Harvard's admissions is essentially going to be not racist, but in a push to essentially look for a more diverse campus so that the entire campus isn't made of social science major, the entire campus is made of scientists. There's a focus on trying to bring in a diverse group of people, which race is a component of. So she is making the argument that, of course, to rectify these inequalities that minorities face, there has to be something that addresses race in college admissions, and that comes about through affirmative action, which she is essentially a proponent for. So, what I thought was interesting was that she said, from the Asian perspective, from that Asian American perspective, that people are more inclined to not want to stand out. And whether that is a part of the collectivism that we see in Chinese culture or Asian culture, she said that what made her stand out essentially elevated herself above the other college admission that were the college people applying, um, and her individualism set herself apart from other Asian Americans, and how possibly it may be more difficult as an Asian American to do well, but that Asian Americans just in general lack individuality, whether that is a bias on the part of the admissions officers. I'm not sure. I can't speak too much about it because I don't look at this very much. But yeah, for the first time, apparently Harvard has a majority of minorities entering its freshman pool of applicants. I'm not sure what it's called, but yeah. So that's pretty much a couple of thoughts that I've had. I'll put the links to the articles that I read today or talked about today in the description below, so you can come check it out. So like and share. And I hope I will see you all tomorrow for the next installment of day 16 or day 17 of the MCAT journey. Anyways, I'll see you all later. Hope this added a little bit of insight and brought things a little bit closer to life for you for the sociology part of the MCAT. All right, bye guys. I'll see you later.